So hi everybody, welcome to those online. As Deborah said, we're doing this class called Samsara and Nirvana, and these teachings are primarily for individuals who wish to escape samsara and achieve a state of peace called nirvana. The samsara is the cycle of rebirth of the appropriated and contaminated aggregates that occurs under the control of karma and affliction. And the state called nirvana is the absence of that, is the stopping of it. So we begin the class as we normally do by doing a short meditation, then saying some prayers together, and then I'll begin the actual material of the class. So please get comfortable in your seat. This means sort of having your feet comfortable, your back nice and straight, your shoulders relaxed. You can either keep your eyes open or you can close them, whatever feels natural and easy for you. When you feel comfortable in your seat, allow the body to breathe itself. And while the body continues to breathe itself, become aware of any movements that might be taking place within the body. These movements are often felt in the upper chest or at the abdomen, and sometimes in the ribs and the back. So you're focused on these movements that might be taking place within the body, and to bring a sort of sense of stability to the mind, have the mind focused, and at the very same time, the body relaxed. Feeling relaxed and having the mind focused. It's easy to imagine that you're surrounded by a great crowd of people, and that in the space above you appears the enlightened beings of Shakyamuni Buddha and his spiritual entourage of the bodhisattvas and the arahats and the dharma protectors and so forth. And each of these beings has a body of golden light. And while we're surrounded by others and we're looking up at the Buddha and the spiritual entourage, we remember that all of us have a wish to be happy. We all wish to avoid suffering, and yet neither of these two wishes have been accomplished by us. We still experience suffering. Our happiness is not long-lasting or authentic. However, it's possible to overcome the causes of our suffering and to have genuine and authentic happiness. These two states rely upon a method, a means to accomplish them. So the Buddha and his entourage teach the method. So decide that you wish to be free from suffering and its causes. You wish to have the authentic qualities of compassion, wisdom, and skillful means. And you want this not just for yourself, but for the sake of all beings who suffer, just like us. So I think you're going to take refuge or depend upon the Buddha and his teachings and the spiritual community to put an end to your suffering and to develop all of your good qualities. And join me in saying, I go for refuge until I am enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened through the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. So in response to this wish of ours, think that lights and nectars pour out of the heart of the Buddha. They wash over you and over all the people surrounding you. And every form of anxiety, difficulty, any cause of suffering vanishes. And we feel at ease. And then we recollect the people surrounding us and we bring to mind the four immeasurable thoughts of compassion, love, joy, and equanimity. We decide to establish all living beings within those four immeasurable states. And so we say, may all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is without suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from the bias of attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And in response to this wish of ours, again, lights and nectars pour from the heart of the Buddha. They wash over us and over all the beings surrounding us. And anything that obstructs these four boundless, immeasurable thoughts is washed away. And we find that we and others now have immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable empathic joy, and an immeasurable equanimity. And then recollecting with ease the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas above us, and wishing to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of others, we say, reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of psychic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own and others' merits to the great enlightened. They're recollecting that whatever exists does so without an independent, objective nature. And existing like that exists in mere name. And so we prepare ourselves to offer this world system, ourselves, and our merit to accomplish a state of non-abiding enlightenment for the benefit of others. And we say, this ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offering. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. This offering of ours has been released, and the Buddha accepts it with joy. And he looks at us and smiles. And we look up into his eyes. And looking into the eyes of the Buddha, we feel accepted and at ease. Then all the enlightened beings surrounding the Buddha dissolve into light, which dissolves into the Buddha. And then an emanation of the Buddha leaves his heart. It moves through space and time and comes to abide above the crown of your head, facing in the same direction you are. The emanation descends and entering the crown of your head, goes down through your body and stops just above your heart. The radiance of the Buddha expands, filling your body and mind with light. And the light pours out through the pores of your skin. It begins to fill the 10 directions of space. And every being within space finds themselves to be within their own enlightened state. And there's no difference between self and other. In fact, these two words are seen to be just designations. And then the light begins to withdraw from the 10 directions of space. It re-enters your heart. You find yourself sitting on your seat and you're breathing normally and naturally. And you realize this meditation was one of imagination. Nevertheless, it's implanted a cause or a condition for actual enlightenment. So we accept this with a sense of joy, thinking I'll become a little closer to attaining enlightenment for the benefit of others. This is wonderful. And then we breathe in through the nostrils and exhale through the mouth and allow your eyes to flutter open and then move your body in whichever way you'd like to. You feel quite at ease and comfortable again. So let's have a look at our class. So we're going to briefly look at what we've covered in the last 2 weeks and some of the books that I've used. So we began by defining what samsara and nirvana were and a number of other terms like renunciation, enlightenment, and so forth. And we saw that we could talk about these phenomena using a category called the two sides of truth. So samsara belonged to the thoroughly afflicted side of truth, and nirvana belonged to the pure side of truth. There we could see also how this topic of ours called the Four Noble Truths could actually fit into the category of the two sides of truth. So the first and second of the Four Noble Truths belong to the thoroughly afflicted side of truth. And the third and fourth Noble Truths, the truth of cessation and the truth of path, belong to the pure side of truth. Now, the Four Noble Truths are taught in a particular sequence. The sequence is that the effect comes before the cause. So the truth of suffering, the Noble Truth of suffering, or the Noble Truth of dukkha, is the effect of the second Noble Truth called the truth of origin. And freedom from samsara, which is called nirvana, is the effect of the true paths, the fourth Noble Truth. And these Four Noble Truths were taught 3 times. So there was something that we had to sort of identify or know the nature of. There was something we had to do. And then there was what happened after we did it, the sort of realization, what we accomplished. And it's important to sort of understand this so we can actually learn how to meditate on these Four Noble Truths. Now, to pull this all this information together, I've relied upon, as you can see, the 8 different books up here. The 4 on the bottom all belong to a particular type of, what would you call it? Not a library, a sequence of some sort, isn't it?
It's a series.
A series of books. And there was another one there, of course, I also relied on, but there's just no room to put them all up there. Probably one of the easiest ones to get your head around here is the one with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, called The Four Noble Truths, a guide for everyday life. Now, these 4 truths, sometimes called the 4 fun facts.
4 fun.
The 4 fun facts, that's right. Or the 4 ideas known by very bright people. These were not made up by the Buddha. He didn't create them. What he did was just discover the way things were. And the discovery became called the 4 fun facts. But today, we're going to be trying to answer 10 questions. And they will have to do with, first of all, defining the First Noble Truth, because that'll be our main topic today. So, yeah, how is it defined? Then we're going to look again at these 3 cycles. So I'll talk about, first of all, identifying them, knowing what we have to do in relationship to it, and then what happens when we accomplish it. Now, each of the 4 fun facts has 4 attributes. So we're going to take each of these attributes, talk a little bit about them, and then we'll do a meditation on each of them. Now, there are sort of misunderstandings that can be made about each of these 4 attributes. So we're going to look at what those are and how you can correct them. And then we're going to use an analogy of the burn to describe one of the ways that this noble truth of dukkha can be explained. And finally, how to act with the knowledge. Now, this first truth, true sufferings, or the truth of dukkha, as I said before, it's an effect of the second noble truth, and it belongs to the thoroughly afflicted side of truth. So I'll do this again and again as we go through the classes, so through repetition you won't forget. And so I want to put this up again, of course, because when it comes to the definition of the First Noble Truth, it's this. That which is counted as a contaminated effect and belongs to the thoroughly afflicted side of truth. So that's how it's defined. I mean, that's all if we hadn't talked about these 2 sides of truth and just put that up, all sorts of questions might arise, wouldn't they? So remember here, this term, thoroughly afflicted side of truth, is sort of explaining the reality from the person who's really confused and suffering. They're in samsara. Now, this truth, like I said, was taught what they call 3 cycles. In other words, the Buddha explained it in 3 different ways. So he began by talking about its nature, first of all. He said, look, we have to identify what this truth is. Then he says, now I'm going to show you how to engage with this understanding of yours and what happens once you do. So then what we have to identify is these polluted aggregates caused by karma and affliction are the true sufferings. And this is the noble truth of dukkha. That's how I identify it. So if you were to have, if you were to say, try to point it out, like it's not out there. You just have to come back like this and go, oh my gosh, it's my body and this mind has been taken through the force of previous actions and confusion. And I've got it now. Like my sense of I is bound to it. So once we've identified it, how are we to engage in it? What are we to practice? So the practice is to become very mindful, in other words, to remember what the four distorted attributes are. So you don't know what they are yet, but that's what we're going to talk about. Because there are four ways of misapprehending the reality, and that's what gets you into trouble. And so once we engage in it, we need to sort of understand that. I have to understand these four attributes and how I distort them, and understand that when I do, suffering takes place. Well, what's the result of doing this? Your realization is that on the conventional level, suffering exists, true dukkha exists, but ultimately it doesn't. And when you know that, then you can say, oh, now this truth has been fully understood. I understand. Now this First Noble Truth, just like the other three, can be understood from different levels. So if we looked at ourselves as being a person of a small capacity, meaning just say, look, I've just come along to a Buddhist center, I don't know very much about this. My understanding is not very large, so it's small. And so can you tell me about it from that perspective? After you've been here for a couple of years, you'll know, actually, I know a little bit now, so I'm sort of an intermediate sort of soul guy, and so you find it's deeper than that, and then later on you find it's even deeper than that. So I just want to show you the depths. So this is, like I said, from the perspective of three levels of practitioner. So the beginner, like us, finds out that true dukkha is what we call coarse suffering. So what does that mean? It means easy to identify suffering. The suffering that you normally experience with your body and mind, like right now, or yesterday, or 2 years ago, when your body hurts, it gets cut, gashed, there's all sorts of things that can happen to your body, and it hurts. The fact that you get older, and that you suffer as you get older, or you get sick, all these sort of things, it's the obvious type of suffering. They're really dealing with the effect here. So that's what we're familiar with now. But then I introduce you to this, not only that, it's even worse, because in fact, while we're human beings, we can actually be introduced to teachings and learn to do something about the coarse suffering. We can work, there are methods to deal with anxiety, with attachment, with anger. But these are the coarse sort of mental sufferings. But if you don't, and you find yourself after death reborn somewhere else, it could be worse than what we're presently experiencing. So there's a lot of emphasis put on the miseries of these lower realms. And of course, there's also teachings on what we experience right now that's also pretty bad. When we go into the persons of middling capacity, now a new thing is put into it. We deal with the coarse suffering, but also subtle suffering. So what it really means here is, like, what are the causes? We really start getting into that. What causes this? But you find it's your body and mind under the influence of karma and delusion. This is the thing we need to know and to abandon. Oh, that's the suffering. So not just ordinary mental and physical, it's deeper. It's called the suffering of conditionality. Just the fact that we have a body and a mind means we're in trouble. Dukkha for the person of great capacity they look at not just their own suffering, but the suffering of everybody. And they see there's no difference between oneself and anybody else. We're all the same. We're all in the same boat. So how can I help everybody? Because the person of middle incapacity is really concerned with just themselves. They understand the aggregates under the control of karma and delusion. They work out a way to stop that, and now they have freedom, nirvana. Like I said, if a person looks a little bit deeper, they'll see there's no difference between self and other. So what do they need to, what's the major cause of the suffering there? It's basically their lack of ability to help others. Why? Because they don't know the dispositions of others. They don't know what would be really useful for you. So it's this lack of omniscience. The person of great capacity, of course, wants to become a Buddha. The person in middling capacity wants to achieve personal freedom and have a state of nirvana. The person at the very beginning wants to just avoid lower realm rebirths. So what do you find interesting about this? Don't have to say anything, but you just need to settle down a bit. Ben, you got your hand up? Yep.
Is there any correlation between those small and incorrect through levels of suffering? Like,
Yeah, there is. Yeah. So it has to do with again what they wish to abandon.
So is it that the small scale want to abandon the suffering?
Yeah. So they're made. Yeah, they're made to consider the suffering of suffering. Small scope. Middling scope. They're sort of. They got to go sort of the next two levels. Suffering of change and suffering of conditionality. Yes,
when you say that the samsara is the aggregates, the contaminated aggregates, it's like a more nuanced version of like the Christian thing of being born in sin, or like not perfect. Original sin. Yeah, it's like a more nuanced kind of version of that.
Yeah, you say that. Be fine enough. You say like what is sin is, well, it's the separation from God. You go, that's the nuance.
But the whole thing of like, because it's like really close to saying that the aggregates are contaminated sounds almost close to that they're wrong or they're bad.
Yeah, it's not. That's the thing. Yeah, those are not sort of useful terms to use. They're sort of moralistic, and this is not moralistic. It's just these are just the facts.
So like the word I was talking to a lady who studied theology, and she said the original interpretation of sin was missing the mark. It wasn't like bad, it's like a target. And sin was just like an arrow. And so we're missing the target.
Sure.
The aggregates, they're contaminated, they're missing them. They're like they've got a bit of dust on them, we need to scrub them up,
Yeah.
Sort of.
You gonna ask something?
Yes. The lack of omniscience.
Yeah.
We're talking here at Buddha stage.
Yeah. Only Buddhists have the omniscience.
Yeah, I have a question in terms of, would that not be defined as ignorance? As a Buddha, I am not meant to be at that elevated stage to actually influence.
Yeah, so the Buddha has omniscience. The person who wishes to free all beings from their suffering doesn't, and they realize it. Like you and I, right? So we're sitting here and go, well, I've worked all this through. I get it. If I want to free all beings from suffering, I actually have to know what causes their suffering specifically. Right? We know generally what causes it, but specifically, do you ask yourself, well, do I know that? I have to say no. So that's an obstacle for me. That's where my suffering comes. So anybody who's had children or is very close to anybody and recognizes their suffering and wants to do something about it. You all know how difficult that is, don't you?
Mhm.
Oftentimes it's just sort of like general advice. What can I do? And it's you know, we say it's okay, it'll be better tomorrow or something, right?
So they can no longer help others?
Who can no longer help others?
Well, if you're at the point, if you're at the level of great.
Say you're a Buddha, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
you have omniscience, yeah.
Yes. If you're at that, or already at that level, at that stage, does that not prevent you from?
Camille's thinking that the great scope is already a Buddha. The great scope is someone aiming to be a Buddha.
So this isn't yet.
So they're
Yeah,
suffering.
so this person wants, you know, their mind has this great wish to become a Buddha and to
Yes.
have this omniscient state.
Ah,
Now, also remember here, just because the Buddha has an omniscient state and you know, they don't wish to help anybody, it's a natural occurrence now. Even though they're omniscient, it doesn't mean they can stop anybody from suffering. Because that has to come from the other person. They have the capacity to help, but to put an end to their suffering, you have to do it yourself.
so
As he
maybe,
said, you know, I can show you all the methods, I can tell you how to do it. And I know what's good for you, but unless you do it, it's not going to happen.
so I guess the way they make help others in that sense of explanation is by honoring their. Take example. Is that correct?
Well, they do two things. One is they show that they don't have suffering, so something to aim at, right? You go, wow, look at that, somebody has achieved this goal.
So I guess that is the influence itself to drive beings at the lower level to.
No, the major way of influencing is through teaching. They will explain to you what you have to do. But it's not much use to us, is it, if you look at someone who's got all these great abilities and they have no way of sharing it with you. So we need both, right? We need to have the living example, and then they've got to actually have the ability to share their knowledge with us. But then from our side, we have to want to be like that. So it requires, you know, a two-way thing here. Okay. So let's do our short meditation now. So and just before you do, remember that these noble truths, the word noble refers to a person who has accomplished, who knows the Four Noble Truths and has accomplished the third and fourth. And they have the ability to ennoble us. How? Through sharing what they understand. So just get comfortable in your seat and keep your eyes open or close them. And I want you to imagine that you are a noble person. You have rid yourself of the causes of suffering and you no longer suffer. And as a noble person, you are questioning me about the truth of dukkha. And you ask me, what side of truth does the truth of dukkha belong to? What do I say? What do I reply? Do you hear me say the thoroughly afflicted side of truth? And when you spoke to me, how did you define the truth of dukkha? You told me the truth of dukkha is that which is counted as a contaminated effect and belongs to the thoroughly afflicted side of truth. And I know that when you explain the Four Noble Truths to me, you explain them in 3 cycles. So what did you explain first? You explain the identity of the nature of each truth. And what is the nature of true dukkha? So true dukkha is unpleasant, it is suffering. It consists of polluted bodies, minds, environments, and the things we use and enjoy. And true dukkha has both internal and external aspects. And when you explained the second cycle of these Four Noble Truths, what was the second cycle you explained to me? You explained how to engage with each truth. And how should I engage with the truth of dukkha? It's with understanding. But it's not necessary to think about every single type of suffering. In fact, I should focus on that which has the greatest impact upon me, and practice remembering the 4 distorted attributes. And what did you describe to me in the third cycle? The result of realizing each truth you explained to me. And what do you want me to realize? Eventually, suffering exists. Ultimately, it does not. So now breathing in through your nose, exhale through your mouth, and blink and bring self-presence. So I saw here when I was reading out the meditation that there were aspects of it that I hadn't introduced to you. And one of them was this idea of, it's a really big topic and it can get really uncomfortable when you read it. So a lot of people don't like to sort of become more familiar with suffering. And so one of the teachers that I've read about said, look, it's not necessary to think about every single type of suffering. Focus on that which has the greatest impact on you. So here we go. Let's talk now. We're going to introduce these 4 attributes of the truth of dukkha. So there are, like I said, 4. The first is called impermanence. The second is unsatisfactory. Third is empty. And the 4th is selfless. So in brief, again, the truth of dukkha is the polluted aggregates. So the aggregates is, another word for aggregate is a collection. So a collection of all the physical parts that make up our body, a collection of all the mental parts that make up our mind. This is polluted with ignorance, a misapprehension of how the parts of our body and mind exist. And true dukkha can be described in 2 different ways. It's called internal true dukkha and external. So internal true dukkha is the continuum of you and I, and includes our polluted body and mind. Whereas external true dukkha includes the things that are in our environment that we use and enjoy. So your chair could be seen as true dukkha. The walls, all these sorts of different phenomena. it's a bit strange, isn't it? So that's why it's better off to call it true dukkha rather than suffering, because if you look at a chair, you go, hey, I don't get it. And I was always like that when they talk about, the chair, the environment is suffering. You go like, what? How can a chair be suffering? How can the floor be suffering? And so better off to go, like I said, the proper word, the true dukkha. But so that's where you can see where it's saying impermanent, unsatisfactory. Because these are the sort of the characteristics of true dukkha. So some of you might have, if you've read some of the Pali literature, you might see these words here and see, hang on a minute, those 4 attributes here, I've seen them in the Pali Sutras, I've seen them, this impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and selflessness. They're called the 3 marks. 3 marks of samsara. So they describe samsara as having 3 marks, and those are the 3 marks. In the Mahayana, the Sanskrit tradition, they give it 4. And in the Pali tradition, meditating on impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and selflessness with insight is actually the whole path. That's the core of the path. Whereas in our tradition, the Sanskrit tradition, we start off with doing impermanence and unsatisfactoriness. We try and realize them first, because they're really obvious to us. And then focus on selflessness and emptiness conjoined with bodhicitta, with Mahayana. Our thing is not just our own suffering or just anybody's suffering. It's like you want to see we're all the same here, and I've got to do something about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take each of these attributes and one at a time and have a little conversation about them after I've said a few words and do a meditation on them. So we begin with impermanence. And so I like this picture. When I saw it, oh, how lovely. Old people, still getting married, still loving one another, still caring for each other. So what's going to, when you put these up, you've always got to have a reason. Like, so why are things impermanent, for instance? Why are phenomena unsatisfactory? Why are they empty? Why are they selfless? So you have to have a reason. So here, the polluted aggregates are impermanent because, here's the reason, they undergo continuous, momentary arising and disintegration. So in brief, impermanent means changing moment by moment. No moment ever stays the same, not a single moment. So this is why sometimes you can get at least for myself, my memories of growing up and, the girls I liked, right? In my mind, I've got this picture of them. And then when I've gone on Facebook and I look at them now, it's like 60 something years later, and they don't look anything like what I thought they did, right? And I'm sure I don't look the same to them either, right? So there's been, momentary change going on that's sort of unnoticeable. You always seem to be the same, but then you look at a picture and you go, oh, very, very different. And nothing has to cause the change. That's the thing. It just takes place. Just the fact that it comes into existence means it changes. But nothing is stable. His Holiness from the book Samsara, Nirvana, and Buddha Nature says, our bodies and minds are transient by nature. There is no further cause or external condition for their changing and passing away other than their having arisen. The Buddha said, whatever has the nature of arising, all of it has the nature of ceasing. So this is really subtle impermanence. So gross changes are very obvious to us. People we know die, but buildings collapse. storms come and will wreck everything, right? It's like, wow, even then we get a big shock, don't we? You know, we're still shocked, and yet it's like, you know, it was never stable in the first place. It just looked like that. Which leads us to understand the impermanence. What are we to understand here? When we understand impermanence, it should dispel the distortion. So distortion means a mental idea, believing that these impermanent things are permanent. Meaning that the things that are subject to change aren't. So that's often the times when we get really, and you see it all the time on television, people are shocked with disasters. And if you really familiarize yourself with impermanence, you wouldn't be so shocked. Because you know none of it's stable, none of it. The planet, the sunshine, like everything around us is not stable at all. It's all subject to change. So you need to be sort of become familiar with this, especially the body of oneself. Subject to change. We know our mind changes from this morning till tonight. Change is going on all the time.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So the truth, the aspect of impermanence, the truth, the way that relates to the truth of suffering is that we suffer because we see the impermanence as permanent. So
Yeah, that's right. We see the impermanent as permanent and we grasp at that permanence.
And then we suffer.
And then we suffer because we're out of whack with the reality. But it's not permanent, and yet we're acting as if it were. So that's a distorted way of being in the world.
The reason I was asking is this feels like it's on the side of the truth. What the verdict is in relation to the truth of suffering. So it's the smelling of the solution. Right? We're seeing it as it is.
Now we see it for what it is, which is impermanent. So this was what's it an antidote to? Well, one is to grasp at the permanence, right? Where there is none. So what happens, of course, is we have strong emotions grasping at all the people you care about, all of the dear ones, and we think, our good relationships are going to stay the same, and they don't. Like, it's not like that. And then we get really shocked, right? And then we react. So we create all these disturbing emotions by grasping at the permanence when there isn't any. We grasp at our dear ones, our possessions, our moods, and problems as being permanent, when in fact they're not. So it's like we grasp at the good as being permanent, but we also grasp at the bad as being permanent, when they're neither. In fact, it's all like workable. If you could understand, if you get your head around, you go, you can very quickly tell if you're grasping at the permanence of any situation, couldn't you? Go, hang on, that's not true. I could do something about that. Or if you couldn't do anything about it, you can accept it. Again, as Holiness says, this realization is very valuable because when it's coupled with the understanding that our aggregates will never be something secure that we can take comfort in, it leads us to seek the origin of dukkha and to investigate it. See if it can be eradicated, and if so, how. So I think somebody mentioned the other day in the class, a lot of people have at other times say, I'm not suffering.
Mm.
And if you look at right now, you say, yeah, for where we're sitting right now, you say, well, you're not on the gross level, on the coarse level, you're not. We're all sort of sitting here quite neutral in a way. But we're not really happy, but we're not suffering on the coarse level. The suffering of change is taking place. We're not really aware of it. That's impermanence. Because at any time, if I was to yell out, hey, stupid, but suddenly your whole attitude might change towards me, right? And it's going to be unpleasant for you and probably unpleasant for me too. Right? So it's like that.
So Eddie, the other day I went and saw a friend of mine in a show, and so then afterwards I wanted to go backstage and say, you know, I was there just to support them.
Mhm.
And the lady at backstage said, "Oh, what, are you her mother?"
Oh,
I'm like, I'm in a milestone now.
Let's do a short meditation on this. Again, just sit there, and I want you now to imagine that you're watching a film, and the film is called The Truth of Dukkha. Yeah. So how many attributes are there to the truth of dukkha? So there are 4. What's the first attribute? It's impermanence. And what does impermanence mean here? It means changing moment by moment. So what happens to conditioned phenomena? Well, they undergo change. They disintegrate from what they were and they become something else. Now you're watching this movie called The Truth of Dukkha, and I want you to imagine experiencing 3 distinct and different instances of change while you watch the movie. So the first instance will be when your feelings were pleasant watching the movie, what changed? Well, you saw something, or you heard something, or you thought something that felt good, and you liked it. When your feelings became unpleasant, what changed? There's something you heard, or saw, or thought, you felt unpleasant, and you did not like it. But when your feelings were neutral, what changed? Well, you saw something, or you heard something, or you thought something that seemed boring. Something didn't matter. And you did not care. So the mind is subject to all these changes depending upon external phenomena. The film. So what distortion does the understanding of impermanence dispel? It's the distortion that impermanent things do not change. In fact, for impermanent phenomena, their permanence is impossible. And I breathe in through your nostrils, exhale, and we'll go on to the next attribute.
Fran's just said she's loving the meditations, and Mandy said she actually types them out and uses them as a study aid. So
Okay. So here's our second attribute of true dukkha. It's called unsatisfactory. So true dukkha is these polluted aggregates, body and mind. The polluted aggregates are unsatisfactory because they are under the control of afflictions and karma. So there are many different ways of explaining true dukkha. Sometimes they talk about the 8 forms of dukkha, sometimes the 6, oftentimes the 3, but there's other ways of explaining. You've got like more than 20 types. So here I just want to mention the 3 types of dukkha. So like I said, the obvious dukkha, the dukkha of pain. This includes any painful physical or mental feelings, right, that any of us would consider suffering. That's the first one. And this is the one, when we hear the truth of suffering, that's what most people think, that's it. With a little bit of study, though, we find there's 2 other levels. One is called the dukkha of change. So this includes happy feelings that are polluted because they are unstable. They don't last. And they can leave you feeling dissatisfied in 2 ways. One, you didn't want them to stop, you wanted them to stay. And the other way you can become dissatisfied is you want more of them. Or you want it to become a bit more intense. But any pleasurable activity, if it's pursued continuously, eventually becomes uncomfortable or neutral. So you may have heard many years ago when there was a crack epidemic in America. So crack cocaine, of course, is a real heightening of your pleasures, of your senses. Thing is, though, if you keep taking it, which many people did, they lost the ability to experience pleasure. The third form of dukkha is called the dukkha of pervasive conditioning. Now, this is the one that the Buddhists are really, this is the one that you need to get your head around, right? So this is just the fact that our aggregates, our body and mind, the collections of body and mind, are under the control of these afflictions. Ignorance in particular, and then karma. So again, I'll say this again, because I've never forgotten it. I thought it's really important. When Khensa Rinpoche, he said, what do you take home with you when you've learned about the noble truth of dukkha? He says, take this home with you. You're not in control. We're not in control. But remember here, this is just the first noble truth, right? There's another one that will show you why you're not in control, and the third and fourth tell you how to get control. So we don't just stop with the first one. We just acknowledge, like you do when you go to AA. Hey, I'm a drunk. I'm an alcoholic. You put your hand up.
I'm a samsaric being.
Yeah, I'm out of control. I confess, I'm out of control. That's what we have to do to ourselves. Right? We begin there. Now, unsatisfactory. So what's the wrong idea that we have here?
That things exist on their own. So
That's true, but this one, that's much more subtle, which we'll come to. So here, as you can see, it's seeing that clinging to samsaric things is useless and frustrating. And so we release our unrealistic expectations of them in favor of doing something else. Which is called practicing a path. So practicing a path to bring about more stable, realistic, genuine forms of happiness. So the distorted thought here is that the idea that things that are by nature unsatisfactory are actually good, blissful. This is, like I said, this is very much like the idea of the cocaine example. first time people smoke it or use it, it's like, wow, fantastic. And another one and another one. And so you think, oh, the next thing you can't stop using it, and next thing you can't feel it anymore. Next thing all your pleasures are gone.
And
You
you're
thought
not,
it was
you're
really
not
good.
the boss anymore.
You're not the boss, no. Do you find anybody who goes through an addiction process? This is how it happens. You get something you think it's really great. You keep doing it, and it's gone.
So friends, Francesca says, that's great, sentient beings anonymous.
Not me.
That's what this is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what this is. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, understanding that samsaric phenomena are unsatisfactory. We turn away from seeing them as the source of lasting bliss and joy, and we release unrealistic expectations of them. Seeing that clinging to samsaric things is useless and frustrating, we relinquish clinging in favor of practicing the path of actualizing the true cessation. Any questions? Okay, let's do another meditation. Okay, get comfortable in your seat again. You can keep your eyes open or close them. And now I want you to imagine that you are in a meditation class. And the topic is the unsatisfactory nature of samsara. And you're sitting in a comfortable seat. And the teacher says to you, who is sitting on your seat? What will you say? You'll probably say, I am. But then the teacher says to you, is your body also on the seat? And you will probably say, yes, my body is on the seat. So imagine your attention is upon the contact between your bottom and the seat. So what's that contact feel like? Now, are your feelings of contact pleasant or unpleasant or neither of the two? Does this feeling feel all over the bottom? Or are there some discernible differences? Does the seat feel hard or soft? Does your bottom feel hot or is it cool? Is there a sense of tightness while you're sitting on that seat or looseness? Do you feel heavy sitting on the seat? Or is there a sense of lightness? So while you're sitting on the seat, are you controlling your feelings? So imagine that you have to remain sitting and not move for the next 5 minutes. How would you feel? Will you be able to control your feelings? Imagine you sit longer and you're required to not move from the seat for the next 60 minutes. How would you feel? Do you think you'd be controlling your feelings? Finally, imagine if you had to remain seated and not move from the seat for the next 12 hours. How do you think your bottom would feel? Do you think you'd have any control over that? Is it satisfying to have no control over your feelings? And again, just breathe in through your nostrils. Exhale. Happy bottom.
Where are we going next for that?
Okay, so let's have a look down another attribute. This attribute is called empty. Now, this idea of this attribute here, empty and selfless, there are all sorts of different explanations for these because they're really highly associated with different philosophical schools. So these different schools have different meanings for empty and selfless. But there is an agreement amongst all these different schools. So all the schools except that empty refers to the absence of a permanent, unitary, independent self or soul that is a different entity from the aggregates. So why are the aggregates empty? So the polluted aggregates are empty because of not being a permanent, unitary, and independent self. So permanent here means eternally unchanging. So that's definitely not the case, right? Like I said, you just look at a picture of yourself, you see, I've changed. Unitary indicates not depending on parts, not being one monolithic whole. So we often think of the body as being, one single whole, when in fact it's made up of all these parts. They're the same sort of thing we think about the mind. We just think, oh, I've got a mind, and it's like one thing, but it's not. And independent refers to not depending on causes and conditions. So when we understand empty, so this counteracts the distortion, believing the body, which is unclean, has an impeccable possessor. Can somebody give an example of something where you might think this?
What, just when you say my body, and you, the me who has it.
Yeah. The me that has it is this impeccable possessor.
Symbiosis.
Sorry?
It's like symbiosis. It's like one dependent on the other. Even like this animals. Where
No, it's not. No, it's sort of not quite like that. It's like the last couple of weeks ago, I gave this example, which I often do because that's how I was. So we look around at different people, and we see people have bodies. So we have ideas about their bodies. Right? Sometimes we don't like the look of their bodies. Sometimes we like the look of their body. Now, whatever you think about that body, whether it's a nice body or not a very nice body, there's still a person that has that body. Right? So some people like fall in love with the body of the person. And when it changes, they want a new person, don't they? They want a new body. So you get rid of that one, get another one, right? There's people that carry on like that, right? But there's others who, although the body might not be what they really want, they like the person. So a lot of people are like that, right? But where's the person? Where's the person they really like? Because it's not the body, right? The person has the body. It's not the body. It's the person that has the body. Now that person is a great person. So they fall in love with that person. Or they seek a really nice person. And this person is, they're not external to the body, but they're not the body. They're the possessor of that body. And they like that person.
So those movies where it turns out that one person in the couple has led a double life and they didn't know them at all afterwards. So the person that they've fallen in love with, that they think is the impeccable person, it's such a shock to find out
They're not that impeccable.
they're not, and it's not even them. They don't
that's
know
right.
them.
Yeah, Chris.
My girl was like RSVP dates back in the day, and you look at the picture, the profile picture that they put up,
Oh yeah.
and you go, oh, she's all right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
look up, and it's like, oh, that photo was from like 10 years ago. like a small little example. And you,
Yeah, so this is again not an uncommon thing to do. So let's do a quick meditation to demonstrate this. So again, you just get comfortable in your seat. So now I want you to imagine that you're at a Buddhist learning center, just like this one. And the person leading the course asks you a question. And the question is, are you sitting on the seat you're on? And you're going to say, yeah, I am. And then I'll say, is your body also on the seat? And you will say, yes, it is. And then I'll say to you, are you and your body one and the same entity? And you say, no. So I say to you, why not? And you confidently imagine saying, because the identity of myself is imputed to the body. The name self or I is imputed to the body, and that's why I am not the body. I'm not the same as the body. So I want you to imagine now that you've said that, your body rolling forward, gently rolling from the seat until it's on the floor. Who was on the seat? There is no one on the seat. There's no person on the seat. You realize you have no unitary, independent, permanent existence apart from the body. Because if you did, you'd be on the seat and your body would be on the floor. So breathe in again. Exhale. So no body independent of the body. No person independent of the body. No identity independent. And no person the same as. Let's now look at selfless. The polluted aggregates are selfless or not self because they lack a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So again, this type of self is like one that is not dependent on a body, it's independent of it. Again, it's very much like the owner. Okay, let's do a meditation. It's easy just to demonstrate it, because you can talk all about it, but before we do, let's understand what's going on here. So understanding selfless, right? So this is to oppose a distortion. Distortion grasps at the aggregates, your body and mind, which are without a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, and take it to be a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So every rest of the before, we discovered, right? There's no you independent of your body and mind in the body. No such person there, right? So then it's like, yeah, okay, but I'm here, aren't I?
Yeah,
You're still going to go,
like it.
oh, here I am. Right? So now it's going to, we're going to take this to be self-sufficient and substantially existent. Now your body and mind are going to take on that rather than self. So we go, oh, well, let's see. Yeah, so we'll do the meditation. So again, you're sitting in a seat. I want you to imagine that you're at a Buddhist learning center and you're sitting comfortably on your seat. And the teacher of this center asks you, who is sitting on your seat? What will you say? And you say, I am. The teacher asks you, is your body also on the seat? And you say, yes. Again, the teacher says, are you and the body one and the same entity? And confidently, you say, no. So he asks, why not? And again, you can imagine yourself confidently saying, because the identity of self is imputed to the body. So I want you to imagine yourself rolling forward, gently rolling from the seat until you are on the floor. Now, what is on the seat? There is no body on the seat. You realize that your body is not self-sufficient or substantially existent. And again, inhaling, exhaling, with your eyes open. So in brief, we can summarize these four attributes. So on one side, you can see here I put up the distorted ideas. And on the other side, the reason why it's not the case. So to believe an impermanent thing to be permanent is a distortion. It's a conceptual misunderstanding of ours. Right? So the aggregates, our body and mind, are impermanent because they undergo continuous momentary arising and disintegration. They're changing moment to moment to moment to moment. The second distorted conception we can have is to believe that unsatisfactory things are pleasurable. but in fact, dukkha is this term, unsatisfactory. Why? Because they're under the control of afflictions and karma. The third distorted conception is to believe the unattractive to be attractive. This is where people often believe the bodies are very attractive. But here it's saying, look, they're not. Right? If you just take the skin off, you'll see how unattractive they actually are. Right? And they don't belong to any, they're not owned by a permanent self or something like that within them. But there's no person like that there. And again, so there's believing what lacks a self to have a self. So that's called the selfless.
So Eddie, I could see quite clearly the first two, how having that distorted conception gets us into trouble and just creates so much suffering. I can see that. The second two are way more subtle,
Yeah,
aren't they?
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Quite.
empty and selfless is very subtle. That's why they, from the Maya, they start with the first two easy. Get your head around that, and then you move to the next two, and you can join it with this intention to understand this deeply, but then understand, look, everybody's in the same boat. It's not enough just to help me. I need to help others understand this too. We need to all be free from these distortions. So here is so remembering these attributes of dukkha. Thing to remember is like, the body is not attractive. I mean, it often looks that way on the surface, like I said, but you need to have a little deeper look. And then you find, oh gosh, it's made up of all these, unclean things. The aggregates are not a basis for pleasure. They're actually a basis for suffering. And we go out looking for other people, men look for women, or men look for men, and women look for men, and women look for whatever as sources of pleasure. Right? They're not. These are not actually sources of pleasure. Anyone who's gone through a divorce will know that.
Yeah.
Right? In terms of the aggregate here, we're really looking at the mind. There is no permanent single mind that is independent. And the mind influences us, we influence the mind. And the environment influences the mind too. And the mind influences the environment. And so here we come to this, usually say persons are selfless, have no self. But the self that they don't have is a specific type of self. The persons exist in mere name. The self exists in mere name. The self is the name given to a body and mind. That's all it is. That's what's called mere name.
So there's not a third thing there.
There's not a thing there, no. There's not a thing there. So, it's often a good, easy way to remember this is often, if you have a child and the child doesn't have a name yet, then you go, so what am I going to call my child? So you come up with a name, Gary. But so you've got a body and a mind of something that was not Gary, and that gets called Gary. Right? But if you look all the way through the body and mind, you'll never find Gary there. Right? Why not? It's just a name. Give it to him. So that's what I mean. We exist in mere name. And this is an easy one to forget. Nearly everybody forgets this. And because the world doesn't look like that. Right? Looks like there's Gary right there. I'm looking at him. Right? There are lots of problems come there. Okay, quick meditation. So again, we're just sitting in our seats. We're going to go through this imaginative process again, but this time I want you to imagine that you have an attractive partner. And you are in a good relationship with them. But your ideas about them are distorted. So how are you likely to apprehend the body of your partner when your ideas are distorted? Well, their body looks attractive. You like it, it feels good to you. It will be a resource of happiness and pleasure for you. It's going to be that way tonight, and it's going to be that way tomorrow. And how do you think about their mind? Remember, you're in a good relationship with this person, but your ideas are distorted. So, in what way are they distorted? You will think that their mental qualities are all good. You will only see good qualities like kindness, humor, loyalty. And you like those qualities. And you think those qualities are going to stay the same. Now, how about them as a person? Your partner, this attractive person, what do you think of them? You will probably think that they are their body, or they are their mind, or they are a good person with an attractive mind and body. They are a good person owning an attractive body and mind. They are the possessor of this good body and good mind. And while all these ideas seem true when you're in a good relationship, nevertheless, your ideas about them are distorted. Because you could imagine, couldn't you, that the attractiveness of your partner increases your doubts about them. Their attractiveness increases your own insecurities, such that your relationship will change. It will dissolve and fall apart. That attractive body could be damaged. It does sicken. It does change shape. It will age. And indifference can replace kindness. Bitterness replaces humor. And infidelity trade with loyalty. Mental qualities change. Persons are not bodies or minds. And persons are not separate from the body or mind. Things are not what they seem. Everything exists in mere name. Oh, breathe out. Bring your attention back in. So I've got one more little thing to show you in a final meditation. So this is what we call the analogy of the burn wound. And it's to show you these three phenomena: the suffering of misery, the suffering of change, and what we call equanimity. Sense of feeling is there, but it's sort of latent. So the first one, the suffering of misery, is really straightforward. It's the wound. It's painful. So physical and mental feelings that are painful are the dukkha of misery. The dukkha of change is when cooling cream or which helps with the lessening of the physical and mental painful feelings, they're felt as pleasure or happiness. So obvious pain of a burn is suddenly diminished. Anybody ever had that lovely cream put on you after a burn or ice? Suddenly say, oh, wow, that feels good. We call that happiness. But all that's happened is the suffering is diminished. It diminishes, and then non-contact with the wound, a sense of equanimity, a sense of neutral feeling. But anybody knows all that has to happen is a little bump, and then wow, it's right back there.
So that's kind of what we call when people being triggered.
Yeah, that's right. They're okay, isn't it? Yeah, suddenly we get triggered and we don't know what the heck happened. Somebody just said something and we were okay until they said it, and next thing we're out of control. That out of control was like what was there was just because the conditions weren't there, and suddenly we're back where we were. Yeah, so you can use this burn example. You could use it with eating chocolate cakes. You can use it. You could take lots of different things, but the burn examples in the text is an easy one to remember.
What's the second misery zone?
The one for the change we talked about, when you put the cream on or the ice and the suffering diminishes.
You have the misery, and then something in the next misery.
The number.
Change, yeah. So so it's meant to be quite useful to do this, right? Because it does a number of different things. One is it helps you or inspires you to look for what's causing all of this. That's the only real reason this is put up. If there's nothing we could do about it, forget about it. But the idea is to like start wondering, what's causing or what's going on here. Just like we have to usually go to the doctors and ask them, this is what's going on. What's going on? We ask them, Here we have to become our own doctors. But thank goodness we've got the Buddha and his teaching to help us. So the first thing to always take away from this is that we're out of control. We lack control. Karma and delusion have their grips on us. Secondly, this is real sobering, right? It's like I said, again, pointed up, we're at the AA meeting here. We're just acknowledging that we're suffering, and it's coming out of this lack of control that we have. When you do this, it will dramatically alter your perspective on who you are and what will actually bring you happiness. The last meditation. If you feels easy to close your eyes here, please do so. Otherwise, I want you to imagine being in a situation in which someone feels strong animosity towards you. Perhaps they're yelling at you, perhaps they're shaking their fists at you. They don't like you. They're upset. Then I want you to imagine that you have strong animosity towards them. Now look at this person that you have animosity towards, who's angry towards you. It will seem to you as if they have always been, or everything they have done is condensed into this horrible person who's harming you. Just check and see if that's the case. Do they seem all bad? Remember, they feel strong animosity towards you, you feel the same way. Just observe how you think that this person is sort of fixed and unchanging. They're horrible. Now imagine just a little bit of mental space opens for yourself and you ask yourself, is this true? Is the person frozen in time like this? Are they unable to change depending on causes and conditions? Can you be absolutely certain that there is an independent person who always has been and always will be the image you currently have of them? How do you react when you believe your thoughts? Who would you be without those thoughts? By seeing that the person is not permanent or independent, your anger will dissipate. Enjoy the feeling of being free from hurt and anger. And again, just breathe in deeply through your nostrils, exhale through your mouth. Then we've come to the end of our class. So today, you've got some idea what the truth of dukkha is. You know, it's got these 4 attributes which oppose 4 wrong ideas about it. There's a way of contemplating about it. You know the sequence, you know the purpose. The major thing to take away, like I said, is get this idea we're out of control at the moment. At the moment, it doesn't always have to be that way, but at the moment we just start where we are at the moment. We go. Karma and delusion have the control over me, but of course they're not permanent. I can change it, right? Because it's not doesn't exist self-existently. It's be altered. There's some readings up on the website. So have a look at page 5 and 16 and 11 to 16 from the FPMT readings. And next week we'll look at the second truth of noble beings, 2 origins. And it's very much like the way I presented tonight. We'll go through the 4 attributes, what opposes them, and put some meditations in as well. So we expended a good deal of energy. We spent 8 more minutes of merit creation. So
Uncomfortable seat.
that's right. Suffering.
That's right.
Let's dedicate our merits. So due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of the Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, not get born and rise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. And as long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too remain to inspire the sorrows of the world. So last year, when the founders of our organization left this earthly realm, and we want to make prayers for a swift return. So join me in saying, in holding and spreading the moonies, precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make this request. Okay, so thank you everyone. Thank you those online.
11 people online.